I eat books from cover to cover. Oh, yes, sir, I'm a real book lover. I get nutrition from science fiction. A paperback is a tasty snack. Literature was my favorite feed. That is until I learned to read. Now I read books from cover to cover. Oh, yes, ma'am, I'm a real book lover. I've been reading ever since I lost my horns of ignorance. Why don't you be a real book lover like me?
Just as trees have sap flowing throughout their bodies, we too have sap flowing throughout our bodies, but we call ours blood. Where trees have chlorophyll, we have hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is made up of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and iron. What if we could replace our iron with magnesium? Then would we have chlorophyll? Would we turn into trees or other kinds of plants? That's what happened to Alan Brewster in today's book, Top Secret, by John Reynolds Gardner. For a school science project, Alan Brewster decided to try to prove that there could be such a thing as human photosynthesis. He went to the library and he read up on all the things that had magnesium. He found out that liver, nuts, beans, even salt water had a lot of magnesium. So he took some water from his father's fish tank, some raw liver from the refrigerator, some old refried beans and some peanut butter, put them in the blender and made a concoction. Then he drank it. And on the third time, it worked. Alan turned bright green. He also lost his appetite. He discovered he loved standing out in the sunshine and drinking water. Those were all he needed because Alan was turning into a plant. Alan's parents got worried about the green color and took him to the doctor. The doctor couldn't find anything wrong with Alan. He said the green was probably an allergic reaction and would go away in a few days. So the Brewsters went home with their little green boy.
When we got home, it was just starting to get light. We live on a hill with a beautiful view of the city below. As Dad pulled the car into the driveway, I could just see the sun peeking its head up over the horizon. It was such a beautiful sight, I found I couldn't take my eyes off it. My parents went into the house, but I just stood there on the lawn, watching the sun. It was as if I were seeing it for the first time. Slivers of light streaked across the sky, and then a bright yellow ball lifted its head up and shone on my face. As the sun's rays struck my body, I felt the most peculiar sensation. It was as if I were being tickled by 1,000 feathers. I started to make giggling sounds, and I got goosebumps on my arms. I held up my arm and looked at it. The green color seemed almost transparent. I swear I could see my veins and blood flowing through them. "Honey," said my mom from the front door, "come in and wash up for breakfast." "In a minute." I kept my face in the sun. I felt so good at that very moment, I didn't want it to end. I could sense the grass and the other plants around me coming to life. I belonged outside with them, in the sun, not indoors. I heard my mother raise her voice. "Come in the house this minute." "Okay," I answered, and I started to walk towards the house. But after a few steps, I stopped. I turned and faced the sun again. The sun. The sun felt so good. I vaguely remember my mother running over to me and giving me a swat on the rear end. When I say move it, but I didn't move. I stayed right there. I remember hearing my own voice then, trying to explain to my mother about the sun. My voice sounded strange, like it belonged to someone else. Then there was laughter. I was laughing. My father came into view. He took hold of one of my arms and pulled. I fell over onto the wet grass. My father threw me over his shoulder and carried me into the house. The moment we were inside, out of the sun, I came to my senses. I still felt a little dizzy, but that was about all. "Are you all right, son?" asked my father. "I'm fine now, thanks," I said. It was the sun. It had some power over me. My mom and dad looked at each other. They didn't say anything. For breakfast, Mom had made some hot cakes and sausages smothered in maple syrup. My favorite. I even put syrup right on the sausages. But the strangest thing happened. I couldn't eat. "What's wrong, honey?" asked my mom. "I thought you liked pancakes." "I do. It's just that I know you're not going to believe me, but I don't think I have to eat anymore." "You don't have to eat," said my mother. "You see," I started to explain, "now that I've solved the mystery of human—" "Eat your breakfast," snapped my father, looking over the top of the newspaper he was reading. "Right now." I put a big mouthful of food into my mouth, but I couldn't chew it. I tried, but I just couldn't do it. My father looked over his paper again. "Swallow it," he commanded when he saw my cheeks puffed out. I shook my head no. Before my father could say anything, I got sick. But I was able to get to the bathroom in time. The school bus came at 7:30. Somehow my body had gotten used to the sun, for I was able to go outside without becoming paralyzed. The sun still felt good. In fact, when it warmed my face, I couldn't help smiling. I played with waffle and lamb chop on the front lawn until I saw the bus coming. Then I ran across the street and hopped on. There are kids at our school with brown skin and kids with black skin. But I knew that a kid with green skin would just be too much. Boy, was I right. The moment I stepped onto the bus, the place went crazy. The kids started laughing their heads off, and they wouldn't stop laughing. Barry Kramer laughed so hard he slipped off his seat onto the floor of the bus. It was only after Ivan pulled the bus over to the side of the road and threatened to throw the next kid off who dared make a sound that they stopped. "What's wrong with you?" whispered Peggy Applegate from the seat right behind me. "Nothing's wrong with me," I whispered back. "Then why do you look like that?" "It's part of my science project." "I thought your project was on lipstick." "It was, but I'm doing something else." "You mean human photosynthesis?" "That's right." "What are you supposed to be? A plant?" Peggy began to giggle. "Let me see your outline." "What outline?" "The one that's due today." "Or did you forget?" "Doesn't matter," I told Peggy over my shoulder. "When I tell my screen what I've done, she'll understand." How wrong I was.
Alan's teacher, Miss Green, was furious. She accused Alan of painting himself green. She told him to go home and not come back until he looked like a normal human being. Alan's parents brought in a psychiatrist. He explained that it was simple. It was a mental problem. Since Alan's brain thought that he was a plant, Alan's body was acting like a plant. Well, Alan knew, even though he couldn't convince anybody else, he was a plant. And then the President of the United States came to Alan's town. He was promoting SWS, Stop World Starvation. Alan wrote a letter to the President explaining that he, Alan Brewster, had the solution to world hunger. If people would only drink his magnesium concoction, all they'd need is sunlight and water. Alan took the letter to the Plaza Hotel where the President was staying. He didn't get to meet the President, but he got to meet the President's top advisor, Mr. Kirby. Well, Mr. Kirby had Alan brought to the hotel and had doctors study Alan for 10 days.
At the end of 10 days, during which time I had zero to eat except water, I declined any fertilizer. The President's advisor called off the test. He didn't look very happy when we met together to talk, so I asked him, "What's wrong? I proved it, didn't I?" Mr. Kirby didn't answer me right away. Instead, he handed me 2 small white pills and a glass of water. "Take one of these, Alan," he said. And in the morning, take the second one if you have to. What are the pills for? They'll change you back to normal. Our computers figured out it's simply a matter of increasing the red blood cells until the effect of the magnesium is neutralized. Then I did prove it, didn't I? I can't tell you that. What do you mean you can't tell me? The discovery of human photosynthesis has been classified top secret, which means that any unauthorized disclosure could result in grave danger to the nation. I don't understand, Mr. Kirby. What I'm saying, Alan, is that your discovery is considered very, very important to the safety of the country. So important that only certain people are allowed to know whether it really works or not. And I'm afraid you are not one of them. But it was my idea. Not anymore, Alan. Now it belongs to the government. I was more confused than ever. My discovery will end world starvation. Isn't that a good thing? Yes, it is. But there are many bad things about your discovery. Like what? How could a discovery be bad, I wondered. For one thing, answered Mr. Kirby, it would bring on the collapse of the entire economy. Businesses would go broke and millions of people would lose their jobs. Why? Because if people don't have to eat, then there would be no need for food. And did you know, Alan, that the food industry is the largest industry in the country? No, I didn't. Your discovery would put all the farmers out of work, and all the cattlemen, and the fishermen, and all the people who process food, and package it, and transport it to market. Not to mention all the supermarkets, and restaurants, and hamburger stands. There would be no need for milk, or bread, or fruits, or vegetables, or lunch pails, or thermos bottles, or even toothpicks. Toothpicks? If people don't eat, then they won't get food stuck in their teeth. Now will they? I didn't realize, I said. But couldn't all these people find something else to do? That's the second thing wrong with your discovery, said the president's advisor. One of the main reasons people work is because they have to eat. With your discovery, people would stop working. And if no one works, then how is the government going to stay in business? The government needs to tax people who work. That's how it gets its money. But if no one works, couldn't the government earn its money the way other people do? Don't be ridiculous, Mr. Kirby laughed. What would you have us do? Sell vacuum cleaners? Sure, if that will keep people from starving. Mr. Kirby looked at me as if he'd been hit on the head by a spit wad. I'm sorry, Alan, but my orders come from the president himself. Your discovery is to be considered top secret. You must promise that you will never tell anyone how you did it. But what about my parents? And Miss Green? No one. Do I have your promise? I looked at the floor. Yes, I said. I promise.
The government took Alan's science project away from him and gave him instead a completed project on how lipstick is made. Well, Alan found a way to fool the government. That's why they're still looking for him. I think you'll like Top Secret by John Reynolds Gardner. I couldn't find any other books about kids turning into plants, but I did find 2 books about giant plants. The Bunga Weed by Helen Cresswell. And for those of you who know the stories about Homer Price, Robert McCloskey has a funny story about a giant plant called Experiment 13 in the Cinderberg Tales. Have fun with these books. And incidentally, I wouldn't try Alan's concoction. I'll see you next time.